All right, you can chime in if you want to give a grade to it, 844-770-3776. But I want to move on to our poll question. But Benjamin Solak basically broke down some needs and what a perfect draft would be like for these teams. So I want to get to that first, and then we'll get to our kind of to-do list for the Green Bay Packers. And you can vote on which one you like the best. Here's what he started with, and I'll stop after the first paragraph and let me know what you think about it. The Packers are one of the toughest teams to nail down in the first round. They have several medium needs, none pressing enough that they must be addressed, but all intense enough that a first-round pick would be warranted for the investment. Just off of that, do you agree with that first paragraph?
No, I disagree.
Okay, how come?
Because I feel like cornerback is blatantly obvious that they need to address that. Am I wrong?
In my opinion,
I agree with you.
I'd agree with you. I think Benjamin Solak really appreciates Goody's drafting ability more than most Packers fans would, more than most NFL fans would. And I think he maybe just believes in the overall defense more than the weakness in the secondary. Because, I don't know, I remember throughout the season, he was pretty optimistic about what the Packers defense could be next year. And also what it could be even last year.
Interesting.
So to me, he seems like he might just be... I think he might be overrating the Packers defense a little bit. So yeah, I would disagree with him too. I think corner is a pretty pressing need.
Yeah, to me you have literally nobody.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
And the pass rush, honestly, is not as pressing of a need, but it's right up there.
For sure.
So I'm just going to kind of cut down what he said in the second paragraph. Let's start at wide receiver. With both Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs approaching their contract years, there's room for Green Bay to draft a round one wide receiver and funnel volume to that player. But only an early pick really makes sense, and that's tough to imagine for either of the draft's top receivers, Ted McMillan or Matthew Golden, making it all the way to number 23. Should either slide, I'd like McMillan for the Packers. Golden feels a little too much like Jaden Reed.
How about Emeka Egbuka?
Emeka
Egbuka. That's my guy. That's what I want.
He might be that
Where's he going to drop to?
He could be that guy that falls to the second round.
You think so?
Be a steal. Everything's the eye of the beholder. He's a guy that is climbing, but then I feel like he's climbed a plateau. So it could be late first, but then the Packers could trade like they did with Christian Watson and trade up in the second round and maybe try to get him in the second round. So.
Which I wouldn't be mad at that. I just want him to be a Green Bay Packer. There's something about the tag that has Ohio State connected to him. Who was it? Mel Kiper saying that he's a professional receiver. Like, I want that. I want that.
Receiver.
And if they could get him in early second round, that'd be fantastic.
I'd feel good about that too. I imagine trading up to early second round for pick number 54 would probably cost the third and the fourth round pick, though.
Ted McMillan, though, if he fell?
If he fell.
You good with him?
If he fell, yes.
Okay.
Molly?
Yeah.
Then the next one here, the Packers could also use a first-round offensive tackle. Yes, even after spending their 2024 first-rounder on Jordan Morgan, both Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom are approaching contract years, as is starting guard Sean Ryan, who beat out Morgan for the job last season. I'd imagine they prefer to extend their internal talent and make a middle-round pick at tackle to shore up their depth, but I wouldn't rule out a tackle selection with that first pick.
I could see it.
I can definitely. I think we've gone over it enough times where Goody would be willing to do that just to protect Jordan Love. Though, I'd be curious to see if he'd be willing to do that and also just kind of admit that Jordan Morgan was a miss last year, if that's the case.
He's never going to admit that, so that's not happening.
I think making the pick would be an admission, even if he doesn't outright say it. The action tells you it's an admission.
Interesting, because I would actually think of it as he's just building depth because of how their season ended last year.
I think that's part of his mentality this offseason. I think that was part of the Aaron Banks signing too, is that
for sure.
He very much believes that the offensive line needs bigger bodies and guys who can hold up to the Eagles or even the Lions in the division.
Mm-hmm.
Then he has the two most likely positions early round picks for the Packers are cornerback and edge rusher. He says on the edge, the Packers' absence of a reliable outside rusher can be concealed during regular season games, but always rears its ugly head against playoff caliber opponents.
Okay. I mean, I'd be fine with that.
And then the last thing he says here, my bet is on a first-round corner to replace Alexander and run with Nate Hobbs, Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams in a suddenly retooled, fearsome secondary. This is the range for Kentucky's Maxwell Harrison and Texas's Jahdae Barron. Though both lack the ideal measurables for general manager Brian Gutekunst, maybe Trey Amos, Ole Miss surprises here instead. And if not a corner, Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, who played under Jeff Hafley when Jeff Hafley was the coach of Boston College. So that's how he wraps that up there. I'll let you guys react to that.
So just curious, because we've talked about Matt LaFleur's influence on what Brian Gutekunst does in the draft, and I think we've established that there basically
no influence.
Isn't. Yeah. Yes, that he is not involved is what we're being kind of told, what we perceive. So how much does it matter if a guy played with Jeff Hafley at Boston College? Like, is Brian Gutekunst actually taking that into consideration, saying, "Oh, it'd be cool to reunite the old coach with his old guy"?
I think it's more of he goes to Hafley and says, "Give me your insight on this player." Doesn't mean I'm going to pick this guy for you, because it is weird.
True.
Just that, is there a player for the Packers on offense, I guess specifically, that you think that has been kind of picked or kept around just for LaFleur?
There was a player like that. Do you know what his name was? He fell under the Matt Hamilton curse, unfortunately. Josiah the Messiah DeGuara.
Okay, you think so?
Yeah, he was a pick that I believe. He wanted him to be his Kyle Juszczyk, and it did not work out. And
Maybe that's why Brian Gutekunst doesn't involve Matt LaFleur anymore.
Honestly, I think there could be something to that, actually.
Well, I just think of, like, when I read other mock drafts, and it'll be like, again, the team I follow, Chicago, they'll say, like, well, I could see them taking this guy for Dennis Allen, or even small stuff of the Bears shored up their offensive line for Ben Johnson. But even, here's the thing, when I read other mock drafts, you can look at any team, the 49ers or whatever, they say this defensive coordinator likes players who look like this. But most of the stuff I read about the Packers is Goody likes this sort of player. But when you read some mock drafts, not all, they talk about, hey, the head coach prefers this type of player, size, length, those sorts of things. On offense and defense, you don't read that as much for the Packers. You read more of Goody likes this.
I think part of it too is that we say that it's Goody who likes this. It's what the Packers like. I mean, this is how Ted Thompson drafted players 20 years ago too. Same philosophy, size, measurables come over production in college.
I meant more of like, do you think Ted Thompson took more of Holmgren or McCarthy's
feelings
insight?
into consideration?
Or I guess not Holmgren's, McCarthy's.
Well, I guess part of why Holmgren left was because he wanted more GM powers, and the Packers weren't willing to give it to him.
I don't think Ted Thompson was there at that point. That was probably Ron Wolf. But
true, but I think that's part of it.
So you think it's an organizational philosophy that the GM...
I think it's institutional, yes. It's organizational, institutional. I think Goody is just part of that system.
And does that just have to do with the fact that the Packers are kind of a three-headed monster in a sense, right? Like, does he have more power than maybe other GMs do because there isn't an owner? Does that come into play here?
Well, you don't have an owner who might walk down and tell you, hey, we're
like Jerry Jones is making picks for the Cowboys.
I would say you also could have an owner that comes down and says, play nice. Like, you have an owner where, let's say you're hiring the GM and, you're going to be like, hey, if you're hiring, like the owner might say, I want to know what the head coach and the defensive coordinator and others think about things. You don't get to operate in a silo. Like the Packers seem on the outside looking in, and obviously they've had success. And maybe we can ask Tauscher about this. They seem more, he's joining the show at 5:30 later today, they seem more siloed than other NFL teams as far as involving how much the coach staff is involved in a pick.
Like we've said time and time again, and it comes back to the whole grocery list thing, is it Matt LaFleur's just given a bunch of groceries and he's expected to cook with it versus actually being able to pick what he wants as his ingredients?
Felt like Green Bay to me.
That's what it feels like.